The day Grandpa Ned died, he smelled like peppermint and motor oil, the same way he'd smelled my entire life. I was 17. I pressed my face against his flannel shirt one last time in that hospital room and memorized it, because I knew once that scent faded from the world, something irreplaceable would go with it. Grandpa Ned wasn't just a grandfather. He was the man who taught me to ride a bike by refusing to hold the seat. He was the man who'd slide $1 across the kitchen table every Sunday and say, "Don't tell your father, this one's between us." He was the man who woke up at 4:30 every morning for 41 years to drive a delivery truck, never complained once, and always had a plan. None of us knew about the plan until 3 weeks after the funeral. My name is Daniel Marsh, and my father, Robert Marsh, is a practical man. That's the nicest way I know how to put it. He doesn't believe in sentiment. He doesn't believe in clutter. And on the Saturday morning he was clearing out Grandpa Ned's bedroom, he certainly didn't believe in a faded, water-stained passbook from a savings account at a bank I'd never heard of called Allegheny Community Savings. "What is that?" I asked, watching him from the doorway. Dad turned it over in his hand like it was something he'd found stuck to the bottom of his shoe. Old passbook from some rinky-dink bank. He flipped through the pages. The entries were handwritten in faded blue ink. Last entry is from 1987. This thing is basically an antique. "Can I see it?" "There's nothing to see, Danny." He tossed it toward the trash bag on the floor. "Account's probably been closed for 30 years. Your grandfather had a habit of holding onto junk." I watched the passbook land in the trash bag between an empty picture frame and a cracked phone charger. Something in my chest pulled tight. I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was grief. Maybe it was the peppermint and motor oil memory still fresh in my nose. Maybe it was the way Grandpa Ned used to look at me sometimes across the Sunday dinner table, a long, slow look, like he was checking to see if I was paying attention. I waited until my father went downstairs. Then I walked into that room, reached into the trash bag, and took the passbook. I almost didn't go to the bank. I turned the passbook over in my hands for 2 weeks, sitting on my desk between homework assignments and empty soda cans. The cover was dark green with a faded gold logo. Allegheny Community Savings, member FDIC. The last deposit entry was dated September 14, 1987. The balance, written in careful, blocky handwriting, was $4,212. $4,000. A decent amount in 1987, sure, but almost certainly gone, transferred, closed, or swallowed by fees decades ago. Dad was probably right. It was junk. But there was something on the inside cover that I hadn't noticed at first. Written in Grandpa Ned's unmistakable handwriting, the same cramped, deliberate print he used to write birthday cards, were 6 words. "For Daniel, he'll know what to do." I went to the bank the next morning. Allegheny Community Savings still existed, which surprised me. It had been absorbed into a regional bank called First Heritage Financial sometime in the mid-90s, but there was still a branch 15 minutes from our house. I walked in wearing my cleanest hoodie, clutching the passbook like it might dissolve. The lobby was quiet. 2 tellers, a waiting area with chairs that looked older than me, a fish tank with one very tired-looking goldfish. A woman at the front desk looked up and smiled, the automatic smile of someone who has smiled at strangers professionally for many years. "Can I help you?" "I hope so," I said, and slid the passbook across the counter. She looked at it, then she looked at me, then she looked at it again. "This is very old," she said carefully. "I know my grandfather passed away recently. His name was Edward Marsh, Ned Marsh. He had this account. I wanted to find out if it still exists, or if there's anything. I don't really know what I'm doing, honestly." She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the phone on her desk and said, "Let me get Mr. Calloway for you." Mr. Calloway was the branch manager. He was a compact, silver-haired man in his late 50s with reading glasses pushed up on his forehead and a handshake so firm it rearranged my fingers. He looked at the passbook. Then he looked at me. Then, and this was the part I would never forget, he looked at the passbook again and went completely, utterly still. "Come with me," he said. We sat in his office. He put the passbook on his desk and opened his computer. His expression had shifted into something I couldn't quite read, not pity, not excitement, something more careful than either of those things. "Edward Marsh," he said quietly, typing, "date of birth. March 3rd, 1941. He typed, he waited. He leaned toward the screen in a way that made his chair creak. Then he took off his reading glasses, set them on the desk, and looked at me. "Son," he said, "this account was never closed." The air in that office changed. "What?" The account was flagged as dormant in 1993 due to inactivity, which was standard procedure at the time. But your grandfather, or someone acting on the account, had filed a dormancy protection notice in 1991. It was a legal mechanism available at the time that prevented dormant accounts from being escheated to the state. The account has been sitting here, protected, for over 30 years. I stared at him, sitting here with $4,000 in it. Mr. Calloway looked at me for a long moment, then he looked back at the screen. "Not exactly," he said. "The account accrued interest, compound interest annually under the terms active at the time the dormancy notice was filed." He paused. He seemed to be choosing his next words with unusual care. "Mr. Marsh, the current balance of account number," he glanced at the passbook, 77442, in the name of Edward Allen Marsh, is $47,386.22. The goldfish in the lobby tank could have knocked me out of my chair at that moment. $47,000. $47,386.22. He folded his hands on the desk. "Your grandfather was very deliberate, it seems. The dormancy notice he filed named a sole beneficiary. It's the reason this account didn't revert to the state unclaimed property fund, and it's the reason it's been waiting here, legally intact, for someone to come and claim it." I already knew what he was going to say next. "The beneficiary listed," Mr. Calloway continued, looking me dead in the eye, "is Daniel Robert Marsh. I cried in my car for about 20 minutes before I trusted myself to drive. Not because of the money, though $47,000 was more money than I had ever seen in my life, and more than I had ever expected to see before the age of 40. I cried because of him, because of Grandpa Ned and his 4:30 alarm clock, and his delivery truck, and his peppermint smell. Because somewhere in 1987, a man who never earned more than $38,000 in a single year had quietly set aside $4,212, filed a legal notice to make sure it stayed protected, and written my name inside the cover of a passbook, years before he would have even known if I'd turn out to be someone worth betting on. He bet on me anyway. He bet on me before I existed as anything more than a possibility. I didn't tell my father right away. I called my Aunt Patricia first, because Aunt Patricia had been Grandpa Ned's favorite, and because she was the kind of person who understood the weight of quiet things. She was silent for a very long time when I told her. "He always said he was putting something away for you," she finally said. "After you were born, he came over for dinner and he said, 'Patricia, that boy is going to need a running start. I'm going to give him one.' I thought he meant he was going to buy you a bike." "He bought me a bike too," I said. "He always delivered on both things," she said, and laughed a little through her nose, the way people do when they're laughing so they won't cry instead. When I told my father, he sat at the kitchen table and didn't speak for a long time. I placed the passbook in front of him. He looked at it, this thing he had thrown in the trash without a second thought, and something moved across his face that was complicated and slow and human in a way I rarely saw from him. "He never told me," Dad said. "It was for me," I said, gently as I could. "He wrote my name." My father nodded slowly. He picked up the passbook and held it for a moment, and I watched his jaw tighten the way it does when he is holding something in. Then he set it back down carefully, right side up, facing me. "Your grandfather," he said, "was a better long-term thinker than I've ever given him credit for." "Yeah," I said, "he was." Dad nodded again. He looked out the window toward the yard where Grandpa Ned used to fall asleep in the lawn chair every August, hat over his face, radio playing quietly. Then he looked back at me. "What are you going to do with it?" he asked. I'd been thinking about that since I sat in my car outside the bank, hands shaking on the steering wheel. "School," I said, "the running start he wanted me to have." My father was quiet. Then, for the first time in as long as I could remember, he reached across the kitchen table and put his hand on my arm. "Good," he said. "That's good, Danny." Grandpa Ned had a saying he repeated so often it should have gotten annoying, but somehow never did. You don't plan for the life you're living. You plan for the life the people you love are going to live without you. I thought it was just something old people said, something that sounded wise without meaning much. I know better now. Somewhere in 1987, an ordinary man in a delivery truck rolled up his sleeves, walked into a small bank called Allegheny Community Savings, and planted a tree he knew he would never sit under. 37 years later, I'm sitting under it. And every time I do something that matters, every time I make a decision I'm proud of, every time I build something that lasts, I think about a faded green passbook sitting in a trash bag between a broken picture frame and a phone charger nobody needed anymore. I think about the 6 words written in cramped, deliberate print on the inside cover. "For Daniel, he'll know what to do." He was right, I did. Thanks for reading. If this story moved you, share it with someone who had a Grandpa Ned in their life, the quiet ones who planned in the dark so others could walk into the light.